We're about to shoot headlong into the 21st century, I think.
It's the late 1990s and the 18-year-old me is at college and I'm learning photography. I've got my Pentax P50, I'm in the darkroom developing my own film and exposing my own shots. I'm shooting Ilford HP5, FP4, other black and white films. This is all I've got the knowledge to do, this is all I have the facility to do. Black and white is how I'm learning the language of photography. When I shoot colour, I've got pictures of my friends, pictures of my dog. For the 18-year-old me, colour is not yet photography. Colour is for documentation. Black and white is for art. Jump forward 20 years to today, and colour is the default for everyone, from the casual smartphone shooter to the professional with a DSLR. Colour is what we use unless we actively decide not to. For most of us these days, black and white is an afterthought. A creative filter we have on Instagram, a Lightroom preset we apply because that particular shot has too much colour in it. Black and white is not generally something we pre-plan. My point is that black and white is more than an editing technique, it's more than a creative filter, it's a completely different way of working, a completely different photographic language. So to give you a bit of an idea just how different black and white can look from colour, I'm just going to click my fingers and turn this shot black and white, change nothing else except take away the colour. Oh, that's gross.
Black and white.
Black and white. Black and white photography is a huge subject and one I can't begin to cover in one video. Well, I can begin to cover it. I mean, that's exactly what I'm going to try and do. Here are 9 quick tips and techniques that I think can play a key role in creating black and white photography. Number 1, plan to shoot in black and white before you take the shot, if for no other reason than it will help you develop your visual senses and expand your understanding of the visual world. Make sure you understand why you're shooting black and white. With colour, that can date the image a little bit more. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something to be aware of. With black and white, you tend to get a more timeless aesthetic. With colour, there's more distraction, there's more information. With black and white, you're dealing with a purer form of image. It strips everything back to its fundamental building blocks of light and dark. You'll find that by approaching a shot with black and white already in mind, you'll start to change both how and what you photograph. 2, look for the abstract. Black and white photography is a great medium for creating abstract work. Try to think about the negative space and the shadows and the reflections. Look for lines, shapes, contrast, patterns and textures. Removing colour can transform your shot into less an image of something and more of a canvas of form and tone. You can turn urban scenes into abstract patterns, and you can turn body parts into what look like landscapes. You can combine the figurative and the abstract like photographer Malik Sidibe has done here. On the one hand, it's a portrait, and on the other, it's a tapestry of contrast and pattern. The resulting image has a vibrancy and an energy to it. A different example can be seen here in Kathy Ryan's shot from the series Office Romance. She's really found a beauty in the mundane. She's turned a generic and soulless office space into a work of fine art. And what's great about this shot as well is that it was shot, as many of her shots are, on her camera phone. It's good to remember that while having good gear is really important, the biggest differentiator in creating good and bad photography is the person behind the camera. Number 3, shoot in RAW or use filters. Shoot in RAW if you're shooting digital, and you can simulate colour filters by adjusting the colour sliders in Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever you use. If you're shooting film, just use colour filters. You can do that with digital as well, obviously, but you can control the tones between the different colours and create contrast and bring out texture by doing this. For example, you can pull down the blue sliders or use a red filter to create very dramatic skies. But as always, don't do anything just for the sake of it. Understand what you're communicating by doing that. Having a big dramatic sky communicates the power and the dominance of nature. The more dominant the sky in your photo, the more it will show humanity's insignificance. Your shot will become more about that. 4, use long exposures. Black and white photography loves long exposures. They can really help emphasize textural differences in your shot. For example, a shot of flowing water can create an ethereal, smooth effect to the water that can really contrast against jagged rocks at the side. Black and white emphasises texture a lot more, and long exposures can really bump this up. It's also good to use a polarizer because sometimes highlights and reflections can look weird in black and white, and if you can minimise those, that's often a helpful thing to do. But again, be aware of what you're communicating with this technique. Long exposures will turn your shot from a snapshot of a frozen moment to being more about the place you're shooting. It will create a sense of time passing rather than that decisive moment that Cartier-Bresson was so famous for. 5. Dodge and burn. With black and white photography, you've got much more license to push the image in post than you do with colour before it starts to look garish. Use the local adjustment tools to highlight sections of your image, bring out textures, bring out contrast, bring out brightness in certain areas to draw your viewer's attention. Darkroom expert Pablo Inerio from Magnum Photos has worked on some of history's most iconic black and white photos, and if we take a look at some of his marked up darkroom test prints, you can clearly see that without the extensive and meticulous dodging and burning these prints were subjected to, these images really wouldn't be half as striking as the photos that we know and revere today. Here are two great quotes by Ansel Adams, who was a master of black and white photography. The first one says, "You don't take the photograph, you make it." And I think that's very relevant here in this situation. And this next one's quite an amusing one. Dodging and burning are steps to take care of mistakes God made in establishing tonal relationships. I love that. Basically, you can't control everything in your frame all of the time, so a little creative license can be employed to help communicate your vision to the viewer. There occasionally seems to be a prevailing attitude around photography that post-production is in some way cheating, and it really isn't. It's as much a part of photography as framing the shot and releasing the shutter. And if it's good enough for Ansel Adams, then it's good enough for me, and it should be good enough for you too. 6. Think about light. Understand how the change from colour to black and white affects light and how it affects mood in your photographs. In colour photography, direct sunlight will give you a warm feeling to your image, and an overcast day can give you a cold feeling. But this is all lost in black and white and replaced solely with contrast. Direct sunlight will give you strong contrast, harsh lights and darks that will accentuate angles and textures. In extreme examples of this, the image can take on a graphic or abstract feel. Softer overcast days will give you a softer light, will give you more tonal range and make your image feel calmer and quieter. 7. Use HDR. Now, I'm aware that HDR is a bit of a dirty word in photography, and for good reason. What started out as a technique to help bring out details in the darks and lights has turned into a creative technique where it looks like someone's vomited on a page and then coloured it in with fluorescent inks. A lot of the time. Not all the time. But HDR can work well in black and white when done properly. So try taking multiple exposures and layering them up and seeing what you can do with it. Have a play around, see where you can bring out textures a little bit more and bring back some details, and just play around with the image a bit. Just don't overdo it. 8. Use black and white to emphasise mood when taking pictures of people. When taking portraits, the loss of colour can really place an emphasis on the subject's expression and the emotive tone of the photo. It can help the viewer make a stronger emotional connection to your subject. Because of this, place extra attention on the eyes. Eyes are a large part of how we read expressions in people, and they also contain extreme darks and lights, so really try and bring those eyes out. Again, don't overdo it, but that can really help communicate an emotive tone where colour would be maybe too much of a distraction. Number 9, subvert expectations. Try creating black and white shots of things you'd usually associate with strong colour. This will help both expand your visual sensibilities and also challenge the viewer's perception of the visual world they know. It can reveal shape and form and texture that was previously overshadowed by strong colour. But something to remember here is that shots that have little colour in them to begin with tend not to make the best black and white shots. It's the shots that are dramatically transformed by the black and white conversion process that carry the most visual interest and impact. So those were my quick black and white photography tips. I'm now actually feeling really inspired to grab my camera and tripod and jump on a tube and go out and do some black and white photography. So I think I'm going to do that. So I'll see you later. I come out to the Barbican, which is one of my favourite areas of London to photograph. If you don't know it, it's this weird complex of brutalist architecture, which is really quite amazing.